Hello, hello. Welcome. I'm going to share this event on Facebook and then we will be going live from there. So please be patient while I get everything set up. And here we go. Okay, we're going live. Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're going to get started in a few minutes. I just want to give everybody a chance to hop on the Zoom here. So in the meantime, I would like to share my screen here. We're going to have a wonderful discussion today with Rebecca DeHart. She is the CEO of Fair Count. For those of you who are familiar with Fair Count, for those of you who are not, we're going to learn a lot about them today. So it's super exciting to have her here. We're going to talk a little bit about the census, about fair districts, and some of the initiatives that Fair Count has been working on regarding COVID recovery and other initiatives to make sure that hard to count communities are represented and that they are also promoting full citizenship across the board. So it's going to be a very interesting conversation. So what I like to do is I like to start with a few videos, again, to give people a chance to hop on. And then we're going to start our conversation with Rebecca about 3:15 p.m. Okay. So let me go back over here. And we'll start off with, oh, sorry. Oh, sorry about that. I clicked the wrong button. Okay, here we go. Okay, so we're gonna start off with a few videos that came out today. Some have to do with the ongoing battle that we're dealing with in regards to the governor here in Georgia, Brian Kemp, and he is releasing a lot of misinformation and disinformation around COVID and the COVID numbers. So that is something that we definitely want to address. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the fair districts because some of those numbers just came out this week. So we're going to start off with this first video, which is from Civics for the Culture. I'm going to play this. So if you're not familiar with them, you'll learn a little bit about them today. Okay, sorry everyone, it's kind of crazy here sharing these screens. Okay, here we go.
Hey y'all, welcome to the first episode of Civics for the Culture. This series will provide you with everything you need to know about the political process and what you can do to get involved. My name is Chelsea. I'm a Libra. I'm from Atlanta, and I'm also on the Fair Fight Action team, and I run our Civics for the Culture series. Please tell me you're curious about this. I figured if we want to truly protect our freedom to vote and protect that freedom for our aunties, our parents, our uncles, our cousins, then we should really understand what we are protecting. This space is for us to learn the facts so we can make the change we really want to see. And the first step is knowing, and I'll give you all of the other steps. So sit back with me as I call on some friends and some experts to help me help y'all, because it's a lot, but we got this. I know you heard about how states are banning volunteers from handing out water if you're standing in line to vote, or removing ballot drop boxes, even shortening the days for us to early vote. I mean, making it harder for voters to vote by mail, and so many people voted by mail last year. Bills like these have been brought up by our state senators and representatives. It's happened in almost every single state. You saw all of the dope shit that happened last year. We got a new president, a new vice president, and we really exercised our power. Well, some of those state senators and representatives were big mad about how many people, especially people that look like us, turned out. Earlier this year, state senators and representatives introduced bills that could make it harder for us and new people trying to vote. They high-key keep trying us. For example, Senate Bill 202 in Georgia, there's a new anti-voter law. But if Congress passes federal legislation like the For the People Act or the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, there will be fewer barriers for people to cast their vote. Our U.S. senators and our U.S. representatives can vote on these federal bills to prevent any of the bullshit that Republicans are trying to do in our state legislatures. This is why federal legislation is so important. Now, a lot of this mess wouldn't happen if the 1965 Voting Rights Act wasn't gutted by the Supreme Court back in 2013. This was a big deal. The Supreme Court took away so many protections for voters, especially ones from southern states who live in places that have historically discriminated against Black and brown voters. So this is where it gets a little complicated, and I feel like I need to call on an expert who's also my bestie to kind of walk us through this.
It's okay, Chelsea. I'm here to help. Here's the deal. In the wake of the 2020 election, Republicans in state legislatures didn't like the results of the presidential election, so they mobilized across the country to pass laws making it harder to vote. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 gives the federal government the ability to protect us from these kinds of anti-voting laws. Unfortunately, in 2013, the U.S. Supreme Court struck down the formula that protected voters, and that gutted Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. Under Section 5, states and counties with a history of racial discrimination in voting needed federal review before their new rules and laws took effect, a process known as pre-clearance. Pre-clearance means the Justice Department or the courts look at proposed changes to voting in those jurisdictions before the laws become official. So the federal government could stop states from discriminating against people of color before it happened. After the Supreme Court's Shelby versus Holder decision, states with a history of racial discrimination could engage in those practices again, passing laws to make it harder for people of color to vote. That's why we call it Jim Crow 2.0. Without Section 5, states like Georgia, Texas, and Arizona enacted new restrictions and anti-voting laws because they can, just like they could before the Voting Rights Act was passed. The reason for these laws is clear. They want to limit who votes in order to maintain their power. Pre-clearance is a necessary protection for millions of Americans who could otherwise be denied the right to vote. It's easier to stop suppression than to redo elections. The John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act would require key states to seek federal review before making new voting laws in their states. But pre-clearance won't be back until Congress restores the Voting Rights Act to full strength. And we need your help to make it so. Right now, we are calling members of Congress and urging them to take actions. Call your senators today and tell them to pass the For the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. Call 833-465-7142 or visit stopjimcrow2.com.
Thank you, Stacy. Oh my gosh. Okay. Whew, that was gonna be difficult. This is Chelsea. I'm signing off. I'll see y'all in a couple of weeks for another episode of Civics for the Culture.
Love it. Fabulous. It's so important that we are making sure people understand why things are the way they are, how things work, because a lot of times people don't know this. It's not even being taught in schools in the same way. So it's wonderful initiative, the Civics for the Culture. I'll continue to play some of their videos as they release them over time, but they're a fabulous group. And if you're a business, you can get involved with them and again, learn how to bring more civics and voting into your place of business. So we're going to go into another video here of our dear friend, I'm being sarcastic, Governor Kemp.
And plus, just like the AIDS vaccine, mandating it didn't work.
Of grave concern when our highest ranking elected official in our state provides misinformation, not once, not twice, but 3 times.
Georgians rely on public officials, especially the governor of our state, to provide accurate information when it comes to public health. This only re-emphasizes why it is so urgent for our state to take up full Medicaid expansion during the special session later this fall.
We have the data that shows that Medicaid expansion works, not just in giving access to healthcare in general, but it specifically works to reduce HIV rates in states that have expanded Medicaid.
I was honestly quite shocked. It was said with confidence. It was built into a narrative about why vaccines could not be required. It was a core message rather than a misphrased aside, and it was still incorrect.
Multiple times in the past year, Kemp has made reference to the non-existent AIDS vaccine as justification to be a do-nothing governor who puts his politics before the health and safety of those he is supposed to serve.
And this is a response by our wonderful Senator John Ossoff.
In Georgia, we've lost 9 hospitals in the last 11 years. Senator Reverend Warnock and I campaigned in Cuthbert, Georgia. Their hospital closed in the middle of this pandemic. Can you imagine? The only hospital for hours around in your community closing in the middle of a pandemic. And these hospitals in Georgia have closed in large part because our state political leaders have refused to expand Medicaid. I met a woman in Cuthbert last year whose brother experienced a medical emergency on Thanksgiving, had to be rushed to Columbus, Georgia. That's over an hour away to treat that medical emergency. And even folks who live in communities where the hospitals have stayed open can't afford the care, can't access the care because Georgia has refused to expand Medicaid. We have the chance now in Congress to change that. We have a moral imperative to expand Medicaid. As Senator Reverend Warnock said, access to health care shouldn't depend on where you live or who you are. Health care is a human right. We can make that a reality across this country by taking action now.
All right. So I'm going to just go ahead and skip ahead. I'll cover some of this information. I want to be very aware of our time for our special guest that's joining us today. So in this episode, we're going to meet Fair Count CEO Rebecca DeHart. We're going to discuss the census, fair districts, and COVID recovery, and how to get involved in a number of Fair Counts programs that are happening over the course of the next year or so. So let me tell you a little bit about Rebecca before we go any further. So Rebecca DeHart is the CEO of Fair Count. She is the CEO of Fair Count. Fair Count is a nonprofit organization founded by Stacey Abrams in Georgia, and they work to build long-term power in communities that have been undercounted in the census, underrepresented at the polls, and torn apart in redistricting. She has more than 20 years of political campaign, policy, and advocacy experience working in Georgia and around the nation. Prior to starting Fair Count, Rebecca served for 5 years as the executive director of the Democratic Party of Georgia. Her tenure culminated after the 2018 midterm elections. Before leading the state party, Rebecca was president of Steel Cut Strategies, a firm specializing in campaign management, communications, and government affairs. It was there she capped off a 13-year lobbying career in which she was well known for her efforts advocating for healthcare access, reproductive justice, and safety for women, as well as children and families. In 2012, she became the senior vice president of a political direct mail firm, serving as both chief creative strategist and general consultant to races around the nation. Prior to founding her own firm, Rebecca was the communications director for the Georgia Trial Lawyers Association and the executive director for the Georgia Commission on Family Violence. A social worker by training and a recovering partisan campaign wonk, Rebecca is committed to developing innovative strategies and operationalizing big ideas to achieve long overdue equity and civic engagement efforts. Rebecca lives with her husband, 2 sons, and a myriad of animals in East Atlanta. Yay, so we're gonna bring Rebecca in. I think she's been waiting so patiently, okay. Hi, Rebecca.
Hey, I'm connecting.
Okay. No problem.
There we go.
Thanks for joining us today.
Today.
Thank you. Well, I'm just so excited to highlight you and highlight Fair Count because you all are doing such phenomenal work out there. And I mean, you guys are touching everything from COVID recovery, the census, now fair districts, and I know there's other initiatives down the pipeline. So I would love to dive into all of that today with you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. We're really excited about this work too.
Sure, absolutely. So where to begin? I know just maybe in the last 24 or 36 hours or so, various maps or drafts of maps are coming out in different parts of the country. I had a little vacation last week, so I haven't had a chance to dive into everything. Right, exactly. It was a long time coming.
Yep.
But yeah, so should we start there or?
Sure,
Okay,
sure. That sounds great. Yeah, we were, and you were exactly right on everything that Fair Count does. We sort of look at it's important to say that we're a 501c3. So we are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization who truly believes that democracy is stronger when all people participate. And we know that some people have been cut out of democracy historically and over time more than others. And so that's really what we focus on, is trying to find that equity. And redistricting is such an important part of that process. I'm sure everyone on here knows that, redistricting can be the greatest form of voter suppression by carving up districts, slicing, dicing, cracking, packing, stacking, all of the tools, all of the things. And Fair Count really focuses on fair, transparent redistricting efforts that are people powered. So we worked in all 11 of the hearings that the state held. We help train people for providing testimony. We do mapping events, which I would love for anybody who is here to attend. More than 35 states require that community of interest maps be taken into account when drawing maps for everything from legislative to local to congressional districts. Georgia is not one of those states. We have probably the smallest criteria for redistricting. It's like 3 words, basically. The districts, they have to be contiguous and they have to have the same number of people. Other than that, everything goes except for what the Voting Rights Act protects us from. So other states, books on all their rules and regulations they have to go through for redistricting. So last week, or I guess and earlier this week, we saw a couple of really big movements. We saw the Senate release the first draft of a potential map for the Georgia congressional seats. So we've been taking a look at that. Of course, we know the special session is going to happen on November 3rd, and it's not going to include local redistricting, which is really important to fair count. So we'll be dealing with that in the next 2022 session. And then we also saw a bunch of local county elected officials come together and really try and think about, well, if we're not doing local legislation or, the local consent calendars for local redistricting until the spring, will we be able to get that done in time for a March qualifying period and a May primary? And so they have suggested that all gets moved back by a month. So the rodeo has begun, and it's going to be a lot to try and follow and track all throughout.
Wow, I didn't really realize that about the certain states allowing communities to submit maps. I looked on the website, and in my mind, I was thinking it was just, kind of more interactive, thing to do. But that's interesting that Georgia doesn't have any, real guidelines outside of the few that you mentioned. Could you maybe just for people who are either just new to the idea of redistricting, just maybe outlining why this is so important, to everybody, and regardless of which state that you're in?
Absolutely. So redistricting is really the process by which we choose who our elected officials are going to be. And what's unique in so many states, including Georgia, is that the people who are actually the elected officials are drawing their own districts. Some states have independent redistricting commissions where people come in and look at different sort of qualitative and quantitative indicators of fairness, which are out there. Fair is not necessarily a subjective term. You can go to the Princeton Gerrymandering Project, for instance, and come up with some real criteria for fairness. For instance, if you are a state that is, let's say 50-50, 50% Democrat, 50% Republican, and you have 10 congressional seats, theoretically, if you were operating on an idea of fairness, then you would bring in partisan fairness to this equation. So about 5% of the congressional seats should probably more likely favor one party, and 5 should be the other. Mm-hmm. Is that what happens? Absolutely not. You'll have states that are 50-50, and one party will have 3/4 of the seats and one will, have 1/4 of the seats. Redistricting is a tool by which communities, particularly communities of color, young people, and others, have historically been carved up, diced up, stacked all into one corner to minimize power. So it is sort of a mathematical mapping tool that can be used to maximize some power and minimize other power. And it gets really tricky. If you're districted into a district where it does not matter if 100,000% of the registered voters who felt the way that you did turned out at every election, and you're never going to break 20%, it's very suppressive. Then people start to wonder, why should I even participate? No one's listening to me. My voice doesn't matter. And so we begin to see redistricting as a tool to keep those marginalized outside of power, to disenfranchise growing communities of power, which we'll see a lot in states, particularly in states that have really dynamic, diverse, and young populations that are growing. And then I think the other big thing about redistricting too is resource distribution. It's not just about who our elected officials are, it's how they represent those communities. So if you take a community, a thriving, culturally diverse community that have a lot of shared interests, and slice and dice it up so that there's 4 different members of Congress, just using Congress as an example, representing that community, then when something crazy happens, crisis happens, a pandemic happens, an earthquake happens, a hurricane happens, and you need to get that support, those federal resources, there's not one person to go to. There's going to be one person who you're frankly not that big on their mind, because their district actually mostly represents a different kind of person with different needs. And so it's a way of really, over and over, we just see it as a way of systematic oppression in a variety of ways. But it's very necessary that it should be done too. And some people are really trying to push the envelope to do it in a way that is fair. It doesn't always have to be so negative. It can really take a look around and say, wow, look at this population growth that we have had over the past 10 years. How can we best capture that so that we're well represented on the local level all the way up, to Congress? And how do we get impartial and independent takes on this process to ensure that certain communities, just because there's a growing Latinx community in one county, that it's not sliced and diced up into 10 different pieces to ensure that they don't have any voice. What are we doing to include that community? One famous thing gerrymanders do often is slice and dice up college campuses to make it really hard for young people to come together to lobby the powers that be. And it would be really great if there were people out there sort of with that fairness watchdog, which is what Fair Count is trying to do, to really try and look at what are the effects of gerrymandering, what are the very real effects, and what is that going to look like 10 years from now too.
Yes. And can you talk maybe about, I know with the census numbers that came out and how, it really, even though, there was issues with the pandemic and then some of the deadlines were either pushed back or pushed up. But I just know, there were a lot of surprises, different places, really seeing how much the country has changed. And can you maybe talk a little bit about that and how you see that impacting the drawing of the districts going forward?
I'd love to. America is growing more diverse, and the last census that we had, for sure, put down on paper what so many of us knew and were so excited about. It was also a really hard census. I mean, if any of y'all were working in the census last year, woo, what a year for Fair Count to debut the craziest census in the history of the United States, the longest census that, impacted by the pandemic. And there were some really low response rates in certain places. And we still won't know where all those undercounts happened. We won't know until 2022 after the post-enumeration survey, which is this thing that the Census Bureau does, which will show where we missed out on communities. But we can take a look, like at Fair Count, we've gone through county by county and looked at what the population was in 2010, what it was in 20, where those have dropped, and within which demographies. And so we can see where we think right away that there's been some big undercounts, but we can also see where there was a lot of growth and where people did participate. We actually had a higher self-response rate in the 2020 census in Georgia than we did in 2010, which is incredible because in 2010 we had a president who wanted everybody to do the census. And in 2020, we really had to fight the powers that be to say that the census is a really good civic thing to do. So what we found out about and what we know so far, and man, it takes a lot of time to even dig into the numbers of the census. There's like webinars every other day as people begin to learn more, because it's just such a huge conglomeration of data. But is that Georgia is growing, or that America is growing to be much more diverse, particularly in the South, particularly in states in the Sun Belt. I think one thing is really interesting about Georgia is that about 50.1, I think it is, % of Georgia residents now identify as white and non-Hispanic. And that's down from like 60% in 2010. And if there were significant undercounts, which there always are in communities of color, then I think it's probably, safe to say that we are already or very well on our way to becoming a minority majority state, which is really exciting and really kind of changes the trajectory and the conversations that we have in Georgia as well, as long as they're captured in the redistricting process. So we're seeing, we're seeing rural areas lose a lot of population. And I have a list of counties, we see sometimes really large loss of population. We see the urban areas definitely growing, and that those urban areas are growing too as they build out, further and further. Atlanta is a great example of that. 10 years ago, we didn't have quite the bedroom communities and suburban communities that we do now that are really moving out. And so it's an exciting time, I think, if you're a demographer and a data nerd to see what all of this growth looks like.
Yes, no, absolutely. I love to see the numbers because it's very clear and fact-based, and yes, and you kind of know what you're working with. So as far as the voting rights laws, and again, I on the show, we're always doing calls of action around voting rights, but can you maybe talk a little bit about, how does this affect the fair districting process and why we need, fair voting rights for everybody?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just so imperative if we want a fair and transparent redistricting process too. This will be the first redistricting that has been done after the gutting of the Voting Rights Act. So before, all the states like Georgia and so many others when they wanted to change districts, they had to go get pre-clearance from the Department of Justice and they tried to prove, what we're doing is not particularly hurting communities of color most specifically. That doesn't have to happen anymore. It's sort of like anybody can kind of put whatever they want in, and then there's going to have to be litigation following, which there will be, to challenge those things in court. What also is unique about this redistricting is the Roberts Court in the United States Supreme Court actually okayed partisan gerrymandering within the last 10 years. So they're basically saying, well, if you're the party in control, and different states have different parties in control, then it's perfectly, legitimate for you to try and map it out to ensure that your party remains in power. What is still going to be illegal is racial gerrymandering, but it makes it a lot harder to prove your case if certain communities were undercounted in the census, which is why it is all so tied together. But they still, can't do that. But there's so many different ways. I mean, packing, cracking, and stacking are the three most used ways of really ensuring that certain people don't have power. But it gets harder and harder, which is why, it's sort of that catch-22, if you're feeling like you don't have power, if you're feeling like you're not listened to, because maybe you're not, because you've been carved into a district where they don't have to listen to you, but really the only way to rise above it is to double down and to participate. And so, the best way that we have to prove racial gerrymandering is by communities having, participated overwhelmingly in the census. So that's why Fair Count kind of sits where we do, because we see a direct tie between the census, redistricting, and voting. Instead of these are separate incidents that we're going to plan programs for, we just see it as sort of like one that we shift depending on the catalyst.
Yeah, that's what I love about Fair Count, because it helps to connect those dots, because a lot of times you're hearing these terms and, you kind of understand what's going on, but then you're not maybe getting the full picture. But could you break down the cracking, stacking, those terms?
Yes. So cracking districts, I wish I had, we have these great visual aids. They're super fun. They look like Tetris shapes, but cracking is where you split apart a district to dilute its power. So, I always look at Henry County, which is just this amazing, thriving, growing community in Georgia. It's just south of Fulton County, which is where Atlanta is. I want to say, I could look, but don't quote me on this, but it's something like they've had like an 18% population increase or something. It's very large. And it's gotten much more diverse. And, there's 3 different congressional lines in it, breaking it up. And so it's taking these kind of like densely packed, diverse pockets of Henry County and making them into bigger districts that's more rural and not to really kind of, dilute that power. Stacking is where you try and stack all the same demography or persons of within a certain community into one district. So that's where you see, like, you might have a county that's, let's say, really pretty diverse, 50% white, I'll just use 50% white and 50% Black. And what you do is you take all of one person, let's say I'll try and put all of the Black residents, instead of equally distributing over 2, really pack in one of them so that, it has like a 90% Black voting population, whereas another one maybe only has 10, 15, etc. So even though the county is 50-50, everybody's stacked into one district and it dilutes the voice. So then it's 3-to-1 white, Black. And stacking is cracking, packing, stacking. Stacking is, really even more of like sort of like the science and art of gerrymandering. But it looks at stacking up communities who don't vote. So that may be, immigrant communities or highly transient communities or, populations of communities that just aren't regular with their civic engagement, that are really hard to reach and hard to count, really stacking those up so that it on the look of the district, it might look fair, it might look demographically, that there's fair and equal representation. But when you actually dig in, you realize that people were put in that specific district because they cannot participate or because they don't participate. We see a lot of that, particularly, we've seen historically around in suburban communities of Atlanta, really egregious examples of stacking in the past.
Wow. Yeah, I really feel like the more people can start to understand the rules and how things are done, the more empowering they can be in exercising their citizenship. And I know Fair Count has, just various initiatives around the fair districts, as well as the work you've been doing around the COVID recovery. So maybe could you talk a little bit about some of those initiatives and things you've been doing with volunteers and people interested in furthering your work?
Absolutely. Yeah. With COVID recovery, we started in March. We didn't think that that was ever going to be a large part of what we did. And we had to out of necessity because the state wasn't doing anything. There was mass vaccination sites that were opening up and nobody was showing up because there wasn't outreach being done. And so we have a year-round 365-day field organizing program. I think up at this point, we've held more than 65 vaccine events in rural communities, brought mobile vaccine units down to communities that don't otherwise have access. We've done millions of phone calls and texts and informational events, and reaching people to try and help and bridge that gap. Because what we know too is in places where, especially in the beginning, where there wasn't vaccine access, there's often overwhelmingly, these are news deserts where, disinformation and misinformation can just blow up and real information just isn't accessible. So we've been focusing on a lot on that. And it really came down to, we're not going to do a lot of special issues, but the pandemic isn't really an issue. We saw pretty early on that we can't have an equitable democracy if we don't have an equitable recovery, because this pandemic is standing to take over the next 10 years, and communities that were already behind, shuttered out, forgotten, or ignored are going to be that much more so if we don't get equity into that recovery. So we sort of see it as a function of really our democracy work. For redistricting, we're having a lot of fun. We're going all over the state. I think we've done more than 70 events now. We're helping people learn how to do testimony with training. We have a program now. We had to switch it to Wednesdays called Write-In Wednesdays. We love an alliteration. Write-In Wednesdays will help people write and craft their testimony to submit online. And then we have Mapping Mondays. And Mapping Mondays is super fun. It's open to anyone. It's on Zoom. It's super easy. Play some good music. Everybody comes on and actually does their community of interest map on Representable. I did mine too. You really start to think about where is your schools, your faith institutions, where's your cultural center, what are parks you use, grocery stores, etc. Because this is sort of like your network. This is your community. And those are the things that need to remain whole and intact as most as they can in the process of redistricting. So everyone is welcome, and we really hope you get there. We have high goals for the hundreds and hundreds of maps that we're trying to make, and we're more than halfway there. So please join us. Our field team is out there doing mapping. We'll be doing, we'll have presence down at the special session in the legislature as well. And we're also going to look at the different sort of fairness, the pieces that have been identified, the different sort of places where we can insert fairness into the process, and really try and work on showing where those either don't exist or where they could be improved on. So we'll be needing a lot of people power to help amplify that as well. And then yesterday, I'd be remiss, I know I'm not on Facebook, so I can't see if there's any comments, but I'm sure Jason, who's with Fair Count as well, is on Facebook. But we released a really fun video yesterday.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna play that later. I meant to play it right before, and then I was just like hopping into the interview, but I'm gonna play it afterwards.
Good. We have a couple of other ones that are coming down the pike too, but I love it because it opens up to redistricting, because it is about all of us. I mean, that's the biggest misconception about redistricting, that somehow, you have to be a GIS mapper or a demographer or a legislator in order to do it. It is the people's process to ensure that we are being heard. And so practice has taken it away from us. But the more we can do to kind of open it up, that redistricting is just like voting, just like the census, it requires us to participate, the better off our democracy will be.
Yes, and we're going to drop the link in the comments, to Fair Count's website, and then all the calls to action they're doing, the different programs. And you also work, have a lot of community partners, like different churches and business and, various groups. Maybe if someone is interested in their organization or, being involved with the work you're doing, could you maybe speak a little bit about that?
Oh, absolutely. I would say that we have hundreds, if not thousands, of partner organizations, and they're not just other civic partner organizations. We partner with barbershops, migrant healthcare facilities, daycare centers, boys and girls clubs. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. So we really partner wherever there's levers of power or community where we can help augment whatever it is that they're already serving. So fraternities, sororities, school clubs, etc. If people want to get active in bringing their community into more civic life, then we're there to help support that. And we have staff and infrastructure set up to support that as well. We have a full faith team, we have a technology team, we have a community partnership team. So go to our website, faircount.org. You can sign up for our newsletter. All of our contact stuff is there. Our Twitters, our IG, all of the stuffs.
Right.
Contact us on any of that too. And then you can also just email us too. There's a contact us page on our website, and send that over. We have somebody's checking it every day, and we'll make sure the appropriate person gets back to you. But whether you want to bring a redistricting training in, whether you want to hear more about voting, whether you want to sign up to volunteer and maybe help some folks get their vaccines, we're here for you, and we have space for all of us to come together to really help make that change.
Oh, wonderful. And I love all the little kits and things, sometimes you all have available and on different topics, and, just giving people the information that they can go share with someone else. So that's very helpful too. Oh,
Absolutely.
wow. Well,
There's local electeds or faith leaders on here. We have 2 kits right now for redistricting, down to, sermons and bulletins that you can put in for the faith communities, and sample emails and tweets and stuff for local elected officials. So we try and make it as easy as possible for people to be able to share the good word.
oh, that's so great. And then maybe, did you foresee yourself? I know I was reading the end of your bio when you were saying a recovering a policy wonk.
Partisan wonk.
Yeah, partisan campaign wonk, right. I'm like, can you really recover? No. But did you ever just see yourself going into this space as far as, not working, in a partisan manner? And did that take time to get past, or was it easier in a way to just, kind of be open to all points of view?
I'm a social worker by trade. And so I just, really got interested young and trying to figure out how to change the world, change systems. And so that's how I fell into politics. That wasn't anything that I was ever, I wasn't one of those young kids who was like poli-sci and doing all this. It was more of just like the systems and process of change. And I love the partisan world, but I love working in the 501c3. I couldn't have predicted it. I'm so thankful every day. I'm so thankful that my friend Stacy saw it in me to offer me this position, to knowing, I think she probably knew better. Sometimes your friends know better than yourself. She probably knew better than I how much I would love it. But I found it freeing in a way that I never could have really expected. When you work for campaigns or parties, there's actually a lot of other things that you're really working, for the campaign or the party to achieve a certain thing. And what I found in Fair Count and in doing this work is that it's so freeing to be able to work for the voter. We get to create programs based on need, not based on what somebody needs to accomplish. We don't go in to get something and then leave. We go in to get some, or to build, and so I really, really love this role.
You could tell, yeah, you bring a lot of joy as you talk about it in such a complex, subjects and everything. So thank you so much for taking the time. I sent a message and Jason responded right away and got me everything I needed. And I was just really thrilled that you all had time to come on here, because again, the work that you all are doing is so important. And, a lot of times I feel like, Fair Count, they're on the ground in the trenches and just have their nose down, like doing the work. And, not everybody knows, what you're doing out there. So I definitely wanted to have someone from Fair Count come on. And I was so surprised that you were available. So I was really, really happy that you were able to come on here.
Well, it is my pleasure. And sometimes we really like being under the radar. So that's okay.
I know, right? I know, I can see that.
We're so happy to be here, and please look us up and get involved and come map with us. It's really fun.
Yes, I'm gonna have to check that out. I love like that idea of like looking at your community, and it's so empowering when you can be more involved and to be able to share this information with other people. And, you know, again, hopefully people can continue to connect the dots, so you're understanding why it's so important to vote and to call your elected officials and to be involved in what's happening with these maps, because, you know, we'll be doing this again in 9 or 10, you know, short years. So it's good to know, you know, start learning about it now, and you can kind of be ahead of the curve, you know, years later.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Rebecca. Have a wonderful day, and please stay in touch, and hopefully you can come on again, you know, sometime down the line.
Love to. Love talking about voter education next year.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Have a wonderful day. Yay! I'm so excited. Please go to FairCount's website, faircount.org. They're fabulous. There's so much helpful information there. And again, they make everything so accessible for people who, you know, have ties in your communities, for you to get these kits and get this information, or they'll give you training, and then you can go share this information with other people. And like Rebecca was saying, it's great that they are, you know, not partisan, so you can take this information, you know, all over. So please check them out, you know, sign up for their emails, and, you know, get plugged in with them. Okay, so I'm just going to go back, because I know I didn't cover a few things. So this is Grassroots Voices with Robin and Friends, where community and politics meet. I started this Facebook Live show because the political work and organizing and community building work I'd been doing over the last couple of years here in Georgia. I started to meet so many wonderful organizers and candidates and potential candidates and just change agents in Georgia and across the country. And so I wanted to create a space to elevate already existing work and leaders, and to support them in the work that they're doing, and to plug in people who want to get more involved. And we launch the Facebook Live, the Grassroots Voices. We launch and stream it through Team Stacey Abrams Grassroots. It's a Facebook group I started back in the early 2020, and we have grown to almost 23,000 people. And then we also have Team Georgia Blue, which is one of our sister groups. So we have about 25,000 between those two Facebook groups. And then I started to make connections with other admins and moderators of various Facebook groups. So now I'm just calling them our sister groups. So please join if you have not already. Team Stacey Abrams Grassroots, make sure to join that group. And then we have Team Georgia Blue, Stacey Abrams Fair Fight Club, Stacey Abrams for President, which was started by Reed Jones in 2019. So this is before President Biden even announced that he's running for president. A Blue Georgia for a Stronger and Progressive America, Envoys for Humanity, and then our two new sister groups, Disability and Democracy, and the Rural Progressive and Afro Southeast Georgian Facebook groups. So make sure to join all the groups. You know, sometimes there's overlap, but a lot of times there isn't, because it's different members and different groups. So you'll get access to information, you know, different and unique information in each group. And it's a great place to build community in the digital space. All right. So today is National Voter Registration Day. So happy National Voter Registration Day. Fair Fight Action is they're encouraging people to continue to call your senators. Make sure that you're asking your senators to pass all the voting rights legislation that's on the books. It's so important that we stay engaged, and to make sure that they know how important it is that we have legislation to protect our rights to vote, especially on the federal level. If you can, find a person to register to vote today. If you have any friends that have moved to different locations and maybe not, you know, thinking of, especially when you're moving, it's, you know, super stressful. You're not always thinking about registering to vote, but remind a friend, you know, if they've moved or if they're getting ready to move, remind them about registering to vote in their new residence. And then also, you know, reminding people to check their voter registration. So depending on which state that you live in, but states like Georgia and Florida and a lot of the battleground states, a lot of times these purges will happen, and there will be people who are on the purge list who don't need to be on there, or sometimes there's just maybe some type of an administrative issue or mistake that could be made. So it's so important to check your voter registration. It just takes a minute or two. So please, for National Voter Registration Day, please take action in some way, even if it's on your social media, share some information, because you never know who is going to need it. And we are still in Freedom to Vote Fall. So for those of you who took place or who participated in Hot Call Summer, I'm going to miss that. But Hot Call Summer was an initiative through Fair Fight Action, where people were calling their senators nearly every day to ask them to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, as well as the Freedom to Vote Act. I believe that is the new bill that came out of the For the People's Act. So we were calling all summer. I believe they said it was 75,000 calls were made over the summer to senators around the country. And so now that we're in the fall season, Fair Fight has launched Freedom to Vote Fall. So here the number is down there listed. It's 833-465-7142. That's 833-465-7142. And all you're doing is you're calling your senators. I'll give you some notes here that came from Fair Fight, that the Freedom to Vote Act, it helps to protect our democracy and strengthen national standards for voting access for every eligible American, regardless of their zip code. The bill is overwhelmingly supported by Americans and people across party lines, because again, it's not going to just be Democrats who are impacted by these suppressive voting bills. It's going to impact any voter. So it's, again, that's why it does have support from people, Americans on both sides of the party lines. And we just need the Senate to pass this, because it's going to ensure that all Americans can register to vote, cast a ballot, and have that ballot counted fairly. So we need both bills, the Freedom to Vote bill and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. We need both. So if you want more information on the bills, what's the difference between the two, go to stopjimcrow2.com, and we're going to drop that in the comment section, stopjimcrow2.com. So you can go to that website, you can hear various voter stories and get more information there. And this Saturday, it's the March for Reproductive Justice here in Atlanta. It's going to be at Liberty Plaza. We're asking people to wear a mask. It's on October 2nd. I can't believe we're in October already. So it's October 2nd, 11 a.m. Liberty Plaza is right across from the Capitol. Excuse me. And it's important for us to get out there and let our voices be heard on reproductive justice. It's about choice. It's about people being able to make choices regarding their body, their health, and not having government intervention and having their body and their health legislated. So make sure if you're in Atlanta, please come to the march on Saturday. If you are not in Atlanta, and again, we're going to drop the sign up link in the comments. So if you are in Atlanta and you want to come to the Atlanta March at Liberty Plaza, click on the link in the comments. It's an action network link where you can sign up and get more information. Try to take the MARTA if you can, because it's going to be hard, transportation issues and, traffic congestion and stuff like that. But all that information is in the sign up link. So please, if you're in Atlanta, you can head up there. There's also going to be marches in Savannah, I believe, and North Fulton County. So there'll be a few marches happening around the state, but this will be the one happening across from the Capitol at Liberty Plaza. If you're not in Atlanta, there's still going to be marches all over the country on Saturday, October 2nd. So it's the national call to mobilize and defend our reproductive rights. And so this is happening through the Women's March. So you can go to their website and you can find, again, a march in the city that's closest to you. They're adding locations almost every day. So again, get out and let your voice be heard, be one of the numbers. And so you can see, the power that we all have out there in organizing and making sure that we can mobilize and defend our reproductive rights. And again, Fair Fight has endorsed Dante Carter. He is running for mayor of Sandy Springs, Georgia. Dante, he was one of our first few guests on Grassroots Voices. He has just such a tremendous spirit, lovely family. His wife is a doctor, OBGYN. They're parents to this lovely daughter who loves to be out on the campaign trail, knocking doors, and she'll go to the Capitol, and she's at all sorts of events. It reminds me of my family, because my dad was the mayor of our suburb when I was growing up. But Dante, he's fabulous. Please consider checking out his interview we did with him a couple of weeks ago. You can go to his website, danteformayor.com, and please, even if you're not in Georgia or if you're not in Sandy Springs, this is a really wonderful public servant that we really are asking for people to support. So if you got a couple of dollars, $5, $10, and you want to make a grassroots donation, you can go to danteformayor.com. He also has postcard writing, phone banking, canvassing, you name it. And again, if you're not here, a donation is always appreciated, because those are extra resources that he can use for his run. So good luck, Dante. And it's huge to have an endorsement from Fair Fight. They just don't endorse anybody. So that is a really positive sign and positive direction. Next week, for next week's episode, I will be joined by the team over at Power the Vote. I'm super excited to, again, highlight their work. I will be interviewing two attorneys, Jamil Favors and Kimberly Allen. They are 2 out of the 3 founders of Power the Vote. They worked here in Georgia, and they are the ones who were helping to come up with an amazing voter protection team here in Georgia, which was so important for so many different reasons. I mean, even after the way Stacey Abrams, I've heard her talk about it, you have to, number one, be able to register to vote, then you got to be able to stay on the rolls, and then you have to get to the polls to vote, and then you have to make sure that your vote is counted. So that's the full spectrum of everything that needs to happen. And having a strong voter protection team that is proactive and progressive and already in place, because a lot of times, in the past, it seemed like voter protection teams showed up after the election to say, here are all the issues that happened. And then, it's kind of like after the fact. And so it's really great. Georgia was one of the first states in the country where the Democratic Party had a around the clock, 365 days a year voter protection team. So that definitely, I feel like, helped them. And I think other states are starting to do this as well. So Power the Vote, again, started by Jamil Favors and Kimberly Allen. They are going to come on and they're going to speak about what Power the Vote is and what they do. And I love that on their website, they're like, we do 2 things. Number one, they fund year-round voter protection teams inside the state Democratic parties. And number 2, they give the parties expertise, training, and support using the best practices that they developed in Georgia. So it'll be wonderful to hear from them. And again, they were in the trenches with us here in Georgia during the 2020 election and the runoffs and all of the crazy, recounts that are happening in some other states. I don't know, they might be trying to count the votes again, only to say that President Biden won for like 100th time. But it's really important that we support and highlight these voter protection teams like Power the Vote. So again, if you have any comments, show ideas, guest suggestions, please email me at grassrootsvoices999@gmail.com. I would love to, hear any comments or any, recommendations that you like to share. I've gotten a few emails from people and I'm trying to follow up with everybody and considering all the show ideas. I think we're going to be booked pretty soon through October. So hopefully, again, if you have an idea, shoot it to me as soon as you can. And before I go any further, I want to go ahead. Well, let me go through. I'm almost finished here. Okay, and then I'm gonna go back and play the video that Rebecca was referring to for Fair Count. It's really cute. So this show, it takes time, work, and energy. I do this as a labor of love. This is not, my main job per se, but I do this as a labor of love because I do have a lot of clients through Donaldson and Associates and our Paths to Peace program. And so I run into a lot of political clients and organizers and various organizations and 501c3s. And so I just really felt like it was important to start a show to be able to elevate and again, share the information and the work that people are already doing out there. But again, this takes time and energy on my end. So if you want to, send a grassroots donation, thank you. I will receive that. I know sometimes, people will say, if they're in town and hey, if I was there, we could go to lunch or, grab a coffee or a drink or whatever. And just to show their support. And so because of the pandemic or because of, location, sometimes, they'll just say, okay, what's your Venmo? What's your PayPal? And they'll shoot a grassroots donation. So that's fine. If you want to do that, like I said, thank you. I'll receive that. But other ways to support too, like and share this episode, tag a friend in the comments, leave a comment, join our groups, and keep fighting for voting rights. You do any or all of those things. That's, again, a huge help to me and a huge help to everybody in Georgia and across the country. So a lot of different ways you can support the show. So now what I want to do is go ahead and play the video that Rebecca was referring to. It's real short, but it's really cute, and it really highlights the work that they're doing at Fair Count. This is called The Joy of Painting Fair Districts and What is Redistricting.
Well, I still got Georgia on the mind. So let's get back to seeing what we can do with fair districts. Add a little nice happy blue there. Ain't that nice? Oh, there's a couple little dirty birds there. They're gonna become lemon pepper wings a little later. Flick a little extra seasoning on it. Gonna put some base right here. And, we got some potholes. You know what? I'm just gonna fill those up with some peaches. There. Problem solved. There's still gonna be traffic on 7585 though. Looks like we got some gerrymandering going on. Now, when lawmakers draw lines through communities of interest during redistricting, it dilutes the power of those communities. So we're just not gonna let that happen. See, much better. We just turned that into a school with better funding. And pandemic relief. How Gucci Mane get there? The East Atlanta Santa. You know what? It doesn't matter. GUWOP stays. Gucci. Redistricting is a people power process, and getting fair districts is gonna need you. So when we use our voices, every community in Georgia can be the happy place we deserve. Visit faircount.org for more. And join us next week as we paint Outcast on the front of Stone Mountain.
That is hilarious. I would love to see Outcast on Stone Mountain. Who knew that Bob the Painter, I think that was his name, would be so relevant now in 2021, and then have Gucci Mane on. Anyway, cute video. I love it. I love it. Let's see. And then I just wanted to end with a shout out to Black Voters Matter, their Freedom Ride 2021. They were all over the place this summer. I think they went to maybe 12 cities or so over a couple of weeks. And I just really love this organization. And full disclosure, they are one of my clients with Paths to Peace, but they are just doing such phenomenal work out there. And I love and just really adore LaTasha Brown and Cliff Albright and the entire team at Black Voters Matter. So I like to just highlight their work and what they're doing. And they, again, are taking everything to the streets, into the communities, and really reaching out to people and meeting them where they're at and empowering people with information. So again, I want to just highlight their work. And this is from the Freedom Ride 2021 that took place this past summer.
Outside the Ashe Cultural Arts Center, buses for 2021 Freedom Ride. Inside, New Orleanians who risked their lives during the 1961 Freedom Rides targeting segregation.
They started beating Jerome with brass knuckles. For many days, I was going in and out of consciousness.
There was a bus with 5 of us on it and a bus driver. They rolled down the street.
Now buses will head out for a voter outreach tour starting in Mississippi and ending in Washington, a route that's the reverse of the original Freedom Rides.
The fundamental foundation of democracy is based on having access for people to have access to the vote.
Louisiana may not have had a big voter suppression bill like places like Georgia or Florida or Texas, but there's still a long ways to go in order to get at the expanded voting rights that we want to see.
Congressional Democrats have comprehensive voting rights legislation, but Senate Republicans vow to block it. Parts of the legislation would overrule provisions passed by Republicans at the state level. I sat down with original Freedom Rider Jerome Smith.
Whatever is coming against us, it's just one simple word: you resist.
Director Jody Smith Simmons and Claude Reese were Freedom Riders too.
Trying to stop blacks and others from voting is wrong. I see that I may be called to get back out in the field to do voter registration.
And what will it take to end that kind of reluctance? Way back there when we did Freedom Rides in '61, it was about reluctance of so much of the South to accept what the Interstate Commerce Commission had said, that there is to be no segregation in facilities of interstate commerce.
Smith lives with the effects of brutal beatings he endured.
I still suffer with, I can't use phones all the time because it generates a sensation.
And they say what's happening in some state legislatures around the country make it critical that Congress protect voters' rights. Saturday, the Freedom Ride for Voting Rights begins on the new federal holiday, Juneteenth.
If we want to make sure that when we have that is not a symbol, that is substance behind it.
Organizers say in May of 1961, buses carrying original Freedom Riders were supposed to stop in New Orleans, but due to violence they encountered along the way, the ride ended in Birmingham, Alabama.
Wow. I mean, it's incredible that, number one, we still have to fight for our right to vote. I'm trying to find this slide. And then number two, it's insane that these people who risk their lives, at that time back in the 60s are still, having to watch this happen all over again. So again, if you have not called your senator yet, or you haven't called recently, please call your senator and senators and ask that they pass voting rights legislation. Do it for Jerome, Mr. Jerome, do it for the Freedom Riders of the 1960s, do it for yourself, do it for your children or grandchildren or young people who are coming behind you, because this has been a constant struggle, making sure that every American who's eligible to vote has their vote protected. So again, please, please, please take action this week, especially seeing today's National Voter Registration Day. Please do something towards the right to vote and protecting the vote. All right. And so other than that, that's all I have for this week. So again, next week is Power the Vote. I'm super excited to speak with them. And again, please check the comment section. There's a bunch of links down there, things about past episodes, calls to action from our past guests. So you can always find that in the comment section. Please leave a comment, like, share, and then, check me out next week with Power the Vote. We will be on at 6 p.m. Next Tuesday. I can't believe it's already October. I think it's gonna be October 5th, I believe, 5th, whatever Tuesday is. So I'm excited for that show. And other than that, I will talk to everybody next week. So thank you. This is Grassroots Voices with Robin and Friends, where community and politics meet.